Welcome to the ROI Masterclass, the podcast where vision meets strategy and bold moves create measurable results. I'm Liat Siegel, interior designer and ROI strategist with 17 years of experience. I help businesses transform properties and ideas into high-performing assets. This show is specifically for real estate investors, hospitality operators, and boutique developers who aren't afraid to take risks, challenge the status quo, and demand a return on every decision they make. Each and every week, we talk with innovators and leaders across industries about the strategies and the insights and really all the unconventional thinking that turns potential into profit every single time. If you believe that smart design, decisive leadership, and strategic risk are the keys to real ROI, you're in the exact right place. Let's dive in. Today's guest, Stephen Weinstock, is a real estate investor with over 20 years of experience buying, managing, and scaling properties across multiple states. He's raised more than $30 million from private investors and built long-term portfolios in markets like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Ohio, and Florida, and Texas. Today, he's the founder of We Capital and the Goethals Capital Fund, a closed-end fund designed to give accredited investors access to cash-flowing real estate without the headaches of management. Thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. We're so excited to have you and hear your perspective.
I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. So tell us how you got here. Tell us why you chose what you do today. Was there anything else that you were wanting to do? How did you get here?
Sure. How I got into real estate. I guess that's the long story, but I'll keep it short for the podcast. But I was working a corporate job. I was in grad school. I always wanted to get into real estate. And I figured I would try to buy something. I was still a kid, so to speak. I was living at home with my parents. This is back in 2001. And I found, I spoke to a bunch of people and settled on an area about 45 minutes from where I live. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and New York City is very tough to break into. And I bought a property about 45 minutes away in Trenton, New Jersey. First single family home I bought. The property I bought was a single family home. I paid $32,000 for it, and I put 10% down for the mortgage, plus some closing costs. So it cost me about $6,000 out of pocket up front. And I had a tenant that was living in there paying close to $900 a month. And my original plan was to keep this one property, pay it off over the 30-year period for the mortgage. And this would be like an added 401k or an added retirement account. But after 2 or 3 months of collecting rent, the numbers started to click, and I started to figure out, wow, I'm paying down debt. The value is going up at the same time. I'm making a few dollars every month. Next year I could renew the lease for an even higher rent, but my payment stays the same. And I said to myself, let's try to do a second one, and then a third, and then a fourth. And it was off to the races. And this became my full-time gig not too short after that.
I mean, what kind of mindset do you need to get into real estate at such a young age? Like, how do you do that? How did you get there? Did somebody set you on that path?
So I always knew I wanted to be involved in real estate in somehow or another. Not necessarily real estate sales, but I definitely wanted ownership or involvement. As a kid, I always saw people who owned real estate as very relaxed, very rich, very well-to-do. They weren't rushing, to the train in the morning, to a job in the city. They always had, extra time, and, they were buying big properties and they were buying, houses and buildings and whatever it was. Anytime I found out, oh, this guy is rich, as a kid, you hear, oh, this guy is rich. What does he do? He has a business, but he owns tons of real estate also. And I realized that a lot of well-to-do people, whether they had a business or a job, always ended up buying or owning real estate as a component to their wealth as well. So real estate was always something I wanted to do. I wanted to be involved in. I realized that real estate value is just keep on going up, whether it's due to inflation or whatever it was. And I wanted to own an asset that, I could drive by and be proud of. And that's really how I got into it. I was young. I didn't really have expenses. I was able to take risks and I was able to jump right in. And that's what I did. And lucky for me, my first real estate deal or purchase worked out. Had it not worked out, had it been tough, like in month one, month two, it might have taken me out of the game and I would have, moved on to something else and never, stuck with real estate. So yes, I've had many failures in real estate over the years and lots of trials and tribulations, but luckily it didn't happen up front.
It's amazing because I could so see how somebody could go into that and then get disheartened because it is tough, especially in New York, or close to New York. It's a lot tougher.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really invested in New York. I'm from New York. I live in New York. I own some small stuff here in New York, but I'm not what you call a New York investor. I did try owning in New York back in like 04, 05, 06. And it was tough. I ended up doing well just because the values went up. But as a landlord, it's very tough to be in New York. So anybody who's making it in New York is extremely talented. And I'm not that talented. So I stay away from New York. Although I'm sitting in my office right now here in Brooklyn, New York, in a building that I own, but I'm not a New York investor.
You need to know where to hedge your bets.
Correct. And New York is a little too tough for me.
I hear that. So what are some of the challenges that you've gone through that kind of transformed the way that you see real estate, the way that you invest today?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I spent most of my career from like 01 till 2017, I was really just on my own. I was buying myself. I was managing myself. I was dealing with everything. Tenants would reach out to me back in the old days. They would call me. Later on, they switched to texting. But, with the advent of Zelle and Cash App and Venmo, that made things a lot easier. I remember driving out, 45 minutes just to collect, like a partial rent. And electronic really made things easier. My philosophy changed over the years. It used to be, I'm just sticking with the smaller properties. I don't need any partners. I am the secret sauce and I don't need anybody else. And anytime I have a problem, call a plumber, call a contractor, call somebody, but I don't need really anybody else. And when I started looking into larger properties, that's when I realized that having a good team really matters. A larger property has a lot more moving parts and it's very hard to do by yourself. You need sometimes, a separate property management guy or a separate guy just to deal with the banks, a separate guy just to deal with reporting, etc. And especially if you're raising money from outside investors, it really changes everything. So 2017, I opened up We Capital with a partner and focused on this aspect of the business, raising capital, buying larger properties, building out a team to manage and run these properties. And I guess my philosophy is always evolving at this point.
Yeah, we always have to grow, don't we? Right? The market is always growing. It's always shifting. And so we need to find a way to adapt. And, there's a saying within the Jewish culture, right? About being a reed, right? Rather than a tree. And we need to bend to the wind in order to adapt and grow. So I think that's wonderful that you have adapted over the years. And I see a lot of people wanting to just do it all on their own. And they say, I'm going to keep all the cash. I'm going to keep all the profit for myself rather than recognizing that even a smaller percentage of much larger profitability is still more than just doing it by yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Having a good team is, when I was by myself, it was just me. And yes, I got to keep, I guess, as you say, all the profit. But if I have a good team, it's really, 1 + 1 could equal 5. And as they say, the sum is greater than all its parts. I believe that's the way it's said. So you can really accomplish a lot more with a good team. And I heard just the other day somebody say the 1 + 1 = 5, and it really resonated with me. And if you get the right team, it's really sky's the limit.
Absolutely. I would say a strategic team is also really important because you need to have the right people on your advisory board in order to make sure that you're making the right decisions that will 1 + 1 = 10, or it will 10x, 20x, whatever you're doing. You also have started a fund correct? In addition to Wheat Capital. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you started it?
Sure. So just to give you a little overview, the difference between a fund and traditionally what's called a real estate syndication is the most common is a real estate syndication. So I will find a property that I like, and then I will go into contract with it, which means I have to put up a deposit, $50,000, $100,000, depending on the purchase price. And then I have usually 60 days to close. And during those 60 days, I have to go out and raise money from investors for the down payment. So for example, if I'm buying a $10 million property, I got to come to the table with let's say $3.5 million. So I signed the contract. I have 60 days. I got to put together $3.5 million. And at the same time, I got to go to a bank and get a loan for say $7.5 million or $7 million, whatever it is. And it becomes a real pressure cooker. But it's the nature of the game. I've done it many times, but it's really a pressure cooker. So even if I have, an entire black book of investors, that tell me, hey, Steve, we're ready to go whenever you have a deal, you still got to pedal to the metal when it comes to the raise. For example, if it's January 1st and I need to raise $3 million by March 1st, in reality, I need to raise more because when I get a commitment from 10 people, a lot of times that commitment might not come through. Life happens with an investor. They're making a wedding, their business suffered, whatever it is. And, obviously just because they agreed to invest and they can't, I'm not going to sue them. I'm not going to force it. And I probably wouldn't win anyways. So I really have to, if I need 3 million, I got to raise 3.5. If I need 3.5, I got to raise 4. And it was a pressure cooker. It was, it's just the nature of the game. You have a contract, you have to close by a certain time. You have a seller who's antsy. You have money that's non-refundable for the deposit. And I had a conversation with a real big operator. This guy was huge. I mean, he was doing, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in purchases and acquisitions. And he told me that at his stage, he's set up as a fund. And what he does is he basically tells his investors, I need $50 million for this year to buy, 10 properties. And he basically outlines exactly what he's doing. So he doesn't have a specific property in mind. He's not in contract. He tells them, hey, I'm going to buy, between 100 units and 150 unit buildings in these 3 zip codes. Built between 1970 and 1990. He gives as many details as possible. And since has a track record, his investors basically just pump the money into this LLC that he's raising. And now, as he's coming across these deals, he has the money already lined up and he put in, for the down payments. And now each investor of the fund is an investor in all the properties that he's buying with this, let's say $30 million, these 10 deals or whatever it is. Instead of, a syndication where the investor is in one deal, you're in this one property, it's not diversified. But when you raise money from investors, the word fund is a scary word. I'm not sure why. And I see it on my end when I try to raise. People just don't like to hear the word fund. Maybe the more sophisticated the investor is, they're okay with it, but they don't like this blank check, this business of just here's a blank check, buy what you want. Also, they want to see a property. They want to hear what you're doing. Oh, it looks like this and it's next to a Starbucks. It must be a good area. And in all honesty, an investor who's looking at the whole prospectus or the offering memorandum, they're really investing in the operator. It doesn't matter what it says here. It could say anything and you could write anything you want. They're investing in the operator and, they might ask questions. They might say, hey, I don't like Texas and I don't like industrial, but for the most part, they're investing in the operator. And with the fund, it just made things a little easier to, you're not under the pressure cooker of being in contract, raising. And with the Goethals Capital Fund, what I'm doing is I'm buying smaller properties. Now, these are properties that I spent, 15 years buying on my own. And these are smaller properties. These are properties that can cost anywhere from, $400,000 to let's say $1 million. And traditionally, I didn't need investors or outside capital to buy it. And maybe in the beginning, but it just never really worked out. It was never a big enough deal to bring investors in, to buy a 3-family house in Elizabeth, New Jersey or in Trenton, New Jersey. It was just too much paperwork, too much, to be married to an investor for such a small deal. It just never made sense. And I had people all the time over the years ask me how they get involved, take me with you, let's look at deals. And I tried, I looked at this. it just never really, it was too small to bring somebody in. So when I got this idea of the fund, I realized I could take the same model and use it for the smaller properties. And the way I set up the fund, I picked, again, I'm outlining what I'm going to buy, although I'm not coming to them with an address and say, here, this is what I'm buying. I picked 2 counties. With this, it's specifically Union County and Middlesex County. And this is in New Jersey, and it's right on the other side of the Goethals Bridge. That's why I call it the Goethals Fund. Goethals goes from Staten Island, New York City to New Jersey. And it's these 2 counties. And I'm buying specific properties between single families up to 4 families. Now, 1 to 4s, as they're called, is a separate asset class. I didn't make this up. It's a separate asset class. It's known as the safest asset class in real estate. Reason being is there's 2 types of people who will buy it, either a homeowner for themselves or an investor. As opposed to, a 60-unit building, it's typically always going to be an investor. It's not going to be a guy who's moving into one of the units and rents out the other 59. And therefore, the 1 to 4s also have more favorable financing because they're worth more. The chance of foreclosure is less. The liquidating or selling the property is a lot easier. So it's just considered the safest asset class. If you remember, years ago, back maybe it was right before COVID or right after COVID, Blackstone, the big private equity fund, they were sitting on billions of dollars and they didn't want it to be eroded with inflation. They quickly went out and bought, 100,000 single family homes because they know that those, keep the value. They move up with inflation and they could sell it one at a time. They're not forced to sell, all 100,000 in one shot. They could peel off 1 or 2 here, 3 here, 4 there, and little by little. And even by COVID, you had a lot of lenders, a lot of mortgage companies send out emails saying, we're no longer lending on certain properties, only on the 1 to 4s. 1 to 4s are just known as the safest asset class. So I set up the fund to buy 1 to 4s in these 2 counties. And what's unique about my fund versus other acquisitions is that I'm only buying property in cash. And what I'm doing is, since I'm buying it in cash, I'm expecting a tremendous discount. So I'll just walk you through what I'm doing. I'll go on a Sunday, let's say, and I'll look at 10 properties, 1 to 4s. And at the right price, all the properties are worth it for me to buy. You lower the price enough, I'll buy anything. And what I'm typically doing is, for example, I'll look at a 4-family house that is listed for $675,000. And I'll look at the property. I'm going in person. And afterwards, I will make an offer of $590 or $600. And typically, the first answer I'll get is fly a kite. Answer is no. Hey, I just listed the property. I can get more, or you're insulting me, etc. And I know this is the response. And I tell them like this. I say, I'm here in person, so I'm not just sending you a blank letter in the mail. It's a real offer. The offer stands. So if you tell me no and you come back to me in 3 months, my offer stands. I'm not going to retrade you. I'm not going to offer, if you call me back, my offer stands. I'm not insulted by you telling me no. I'm also showing you that I have proof of funds. I show them a bank statement. I have the money where I can close. And I can close right away. I am also telling them that I can close within 21 days, meaning we sign a contract. I will buy this property. We will close in 21 days. I don't have to go to a mortgage. I don't have to go to a bank. I have the cash. I can write out a check. I also tell them that my deposit is non-refundable. So if we go into contract and I give you a deposit, it's non-refundable, which means I'm going to close or you keep my 25, 50,000. And with the 1 to 4s, typically these deposits are refundable. People you speak to, they typically have what's called a mortgage contingency. People are buying a house. For some reason, the mortgage company doesn't approve them or doesn't find the value in the house. Contract is over. They get their deposit back. So I'm really telling these people, hey, I am here to close. My offer is real. So if I see 10 today and I make 10 offers today, within the next 3 months, I will get 2 or 3 phone calls from those people. And at this point, usually the phone calls I get are people who are pissed off. They're upset. They were either in contract with a higher offer that didn't go through, or they never got their offer to begin with, or they upset with their broker. Hey, the broker promised me this. I'm nowhere near it. They're just usually upset and they're like, okay, I'll take your offer. And sometimes I'll try and negotiate and maybe we won't find common ground. Sometimes we will. But so that's where it's a numbers game for me. So I got to see 10 of these every Sunday. So I could build a pipeline. So 3 months down the road, I can get a property that's really worth $675. I can get it for $590. And I'm buying these properties in cash, which means I am locking in this equity right away. And what I do is I wait about a year of ownership. After I purchase the property, I wait about a year before I refinance, because if I buy a property that's worth $675 today and I buy it for $590 and I go to the bank tomorrow, typically the bank is going to value the property at my purchase price. And remember, I got a tremendous discount. But for the most part, yes, these days you'll have some lenders that may do a new appraisal and realize, wow, this guy got a great deal. But for the most part, they're going to value it at the purchase price. So I wait about a year because there's something called the seasoning period. And after a year, most banks are required to do a new appraisal because the market could have changed over the last 12 months. So when they do an appraisal and they see, and the value really is $675 because, other properties similar sold for $675, when they lend me the money, they're going to lend me 75% of $675 or 70%. Which means I'll recoup a lot of my original money to purchase the property in the form of a loan. And what I do with that loan, I go out and I buy another property in cash and I rinse and repeat. So just to give an example, a quick overview of the fund, it's a $6 million fund. I'm buying 10 houses at, let's say, $600,000. They're worth $675. I'm buying 10 houses at $600,000. I am waiting a year. And after a year, I'm going to the bank and they're going to lend me about 75%, which is about $4.8 million. So I'm going to take the $4.8 million and I'm now going to buy another 6 or 7 houses in cash with this discount. And then at the end of that year, I take these 7, 8 houses or 6 or 7 houses, go to the bank, refinance, get 70%. And I go out and I buy another 3 or 4 or 4 or 5 houses at this price. What I'm doing is I'm taking $6 million from investors, and over a 5-year period, I'm not asking them for more money. It's $6 million up front, and I'm able to buy about 28, 29 of these properties over a 5-year period. And we all know that the hardest part of owning real estate, or the riskiest part, is typically the first year. You're new to it. You don't know what's happening. Maybe you're fixing up a unit so there's no rent. And no matter what, the mortgages do. The biggest risk to investors in general, every deal you have, the biggest risk to investors is always going to be the bank, the mortgage, because the mortgage has to get paid no matter what. And if your plan of, emptying out the tenants and putting higher tenants in is delayed, the bank still has to get paid every month. The person who gets the short end of that is going to be the investors. So they can't get, their distributions or their profits. If you're doing a development deal and it's 2 years of, construction, the bank gets paid every month no matter what. So if you get delayed and now it's 3 years or 4 years, it's the investors that take the hit. And in the worst case scenario, if you can't pay the bank takes the property away, investors are wiped out. So the biggest risk to investors is always the mortgage. And what I'm doing here is there's no mortgage for the first year, which means the risk for the investors is that much less. I mean, in effect, I'm using investors' money to buy the property in cash. The investors are basically a first lien holder, a first lien position mortgage holder on these properties for the first year. Afterwards, after the property is stable, maybe after I raise some rents, maybe after I got some low performing tenants out and put some new ones in during that first year period, and now a bank decides to lend me money based on the performance of the property and the value, the investors are now, meaning they own the property the first year without a mortgage. They were able to take all that profit from the rent because I'm not paying a mortgage. I'm paying the property tax, I'm paying the maintenance, etc. So that first year, they're really taking a big chunk of what's left for themselves. So in year 2, they're making less from these 10 houses because in year 1, there was so much left over because there's no mortgage. So their cash flow was much greater. In year 2, these properties now have a loan on it. So they're making a little less monthly, but we're taking this money and we're buying new property. So they're able to profit from the values of all these properties going up over the 5-year period. And at the same time, taking cash or the equity and now buying more and more and more. And New Jersey, at least these parts of New Jersey, the parts that are near New York, I've always done well with it. since 2001. It sort of feeds off the New York vibe. New York is just a tremendous population center, and all the surrounding areas, whether it's anywhere surrounding New York City, is just become huge real estate markets, and the values have really done very well in these parts of New Jersey. So even though I am tapping the equity to buy something new, the values of these properties are constantly getting raised. So for my investors, there's cash flow, and then there's, at the end of the 5-year fund, selling the properties, God willing, for a large profit.
You basically gave us a window into how to be more profitable, hands down, and how to leverage your network and how to work together. Again, it plays off so many themes that we've spoken about so far already, about the systemization, about not operating alone, right? And having a strategy that will enable you to get to a higher ROI. You're really the sum of the people that you surround yourself by. And if you're surrounding yourself by people who are going to give you a leg up or help you in working together in order to achieve that higher growth, then you can achieve that much more. And it's very powerful what you're explaining about the fund and how you're kind of creating a pool of funding to be able to achieve that much greater profitability and being able to purchase more too, ultimately. So how do you pitch this to investors? You mentioned that the word fund kind of irks people, makes them feel uncomfortable. How do you pitch it to them so that they understand?
Sure. So the reason why the word fund irks people, I guess there's multiple reasons why it bothers people. For people who are, I hate to use the word, not sophisticated investors, or what I call mom and pop investors, the reason why they don't like it is because they're not seeing a specific address. They're not seeing a specific property. Now, the good thing is when you do a fund, let's say it's a $30 million fund, or in my case, a $6 million fund, you could already start the process, even though you only raised $2 million or $5 million. You could already start the acquisition. Now, once you already own something in the fund, it does make it easier because you're telling them, hey, here's this house that the fund already owns. This is exactly the kinds of properties we'll be buying. And if you invest, the second you give me a check, you are now part owner, prorated, of this house. And I'm going to use your money to now buy a second house or a third house, but automatically you are already a partial owner of this house. As far as very sophisticated investors, the reason why they don't like to hear the word fund is the word fund 90% of the time is structured in a way where there's like extra fees, like double fees. It's something called fund of funds. There's a lot of funds now invest into other people's deals. So there's fees there and now fees, for the fund manager. With my fund specifically, and I guess, about 10% of the funds out there, it's set up really just as a large partnership. So it's called fund, but really we're just all partners in an LLC. And this LLC owns 2 properties, 3 properties, 10 properties, 20 properties. So that it's not set up in a way where it's more expensive. So again, the word fund just irks people. You just have to explain to them. It's more explanation. And I try to tell everybody that, give me, 20 minutes on the phone or in person to explain to you exactly what we're buying, how we're buying it, how it's structured. And, we let the chips fall where they may.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that once somebody understands not only your track record, but they understand your whole thesis and why you're doing it and your whole way of doing things, I think that it's easy to understand and clear that this makes a lot of sense. And it's just all really about marketing.
Correct. Yes, it's definitely a marketing game. I've done a few podcasts. That obviously helps. It gives people, when you're on a podcast, it gives you this air of authenticity and, hey, I'm like the smartest guy in the room. I sometimes speak by some of these conferences and, I could be on the stage with like 2 or 3 other people. And after it's over, I'll have 10 people lined up to speak to me. And I remember the first time it happened, it was like, wow, I feel like Avram Fried after a concert. Wow, people want to take selfies with me, or, this is what Ishai Ribo must feel like afterwards. Like, wow. And, it's really humbling actually, to do it. But I love speaking at these conferences because it's great for networking and, puts my name out there. So now in a room of, 200 people who are paying attention, they all sort of know who I am. And, like you said, it's about marketing, networking, just getting out there. And, that's why I love, doing these podcasts.
Yeah. And it's just fascinating also to just share all of these details with our audience, because I think that ultimately anybody who understands will see the value in doing it this way. What are you seeing in terms of trends in the marketplace? Like, what's next? Is there another asset class that is also going to be very profitable? Or is it just this?
So that's a good question. In general, I am always optimistic. Always. If you asked me 3 years ago, are rates coming down in the next 6 months? I would have said, yeah, I think so. And then 6 months later, when they didn't come down, if you asked me, do you think they're coming down? I would have said, yeah, I think so. So I'm always optimistic in general. However, when I buy something, I try to make sure that I'm buying it based on the fundamentals of right now, and maybe, a little worse if it gets worse. Just to give an example, I bought something in the end of 2001. The rates were 5% at the time, and the loan that I was getting was a variable, which means it could fluctuate as rates went up. And, we were living in a time with the rates being low. I'm paying 5%. And what I did was I bought it, but I underwrote it that it could do okay if rates went up to 8%. And I closed, we bought it paying 5%, a few months. And we all know at the end of 21, early 22, the rates started going up. Every month when the mortgage came out, it was, creeped up. And then it got to 6% and 7%. And I'm like, it's okay. We got this. And then I got to 8%, and now I'm afraid. And then it went to 9%, and then it went to 10%, and it almost went to 11%. And it really, really hurt me. I mean, financially, it put the deal, not necessarily in jeopardy, but it just made me take this loan that was supposed to be a 3-year loan to now I got to go out and get a different loan, pay all the fees for this, to do the loan, which is a couple $100,000 when you're dealing with a large loan. And will the loan be large enough to cover to pay off the first loan? When the rates are higher, the monthly payment is more, which means they're only going to lend you whatever you could afford. So with a low rate, you might be able to afford a $7 million loan. But with a high rate, you might only be able to afford a $6 million loan. And it was very nerve-wracking because I couldn't pay 10%. And to get out of the loan, I might only get a loan for, let's say, $6 million, but I got a $7 million loan, which means I got to ask my investors, pony up or else we're out. I got lucky where my lender, the first lender that lent me the money, was supposed to lend me, 72% or whatever it was of the value of the purchase. And I remember at the time, I was able to go to other lenders who would have lent 75 or more. And I remember being upset with my broker, like, come on, I don't have to raise so much for my investors. I can get a loan for, 75%. Why are we doing it 72? And we ended up, okay, fine. And right before the closing, like 2 weeks before the closing, the lender changed their underwriting or whatever it was and said, we're sorry, but we're only going to lend you 68%. I was pissed. Upset. I'm like, what do I do? We're literally at the closing, at the finish line. And I had to go to my investors or more investors and raise more money, in order to close, because now the bank's lending me less. I need more of a down payment. And you fast forward, 13, 14 months when I was switching out of this loan. The reason I was able to switch out of the loan without asking my investors for more capital was because since my loan was lower, again, this first lender, I guess they saw the writing on the wall in the future. They decided to only lend me much less. Instead of, $7.5 million, they lent me, $7.1 million or whatever the exact numbers were. So when I was searching for a new loan, all I needed to replace was 7.1, not 7.5. And it really put me in a much better spot where a lot of people who I know were, did borrow so much more, and they were stuck in these large loans because they couldn't go to their investors to get a lower loan, and they're stuck paying 10%. So they're basically starving the property. They're not paying investors, profits monthly, and they're trying to refinance, and they're trying to figure out a way to get a new loan and come to the table with, $500,000-$600,000 extra to get this loan. So I remember reaching out to to the lender after we closed on this. I said, you remember how I was so upset with you? And it was, pissed off at you for lending me so much less, you ended up saving the property by doing so. I have a karas hatov to him changing his mind at the last minute.
And for our audience that doesn't know what hakarat hatov is, can you explain that?
Sure. I had gratitude, a lot of gratitude. Hakaras hatov, or as you say it with your accent, hakarat hatov, I guess, if I said that correctly, means you have gratitude. When something happens, whether at the time you're not sure if it's good or bad, if it works out, reach out to the person, say, you were right. I have gratitude.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't have a crystal ball. And I like your approach of just looking at what's happening now and going based off of that. That's the only way we can really make a decision. We can look at certain market trends and things like that. But I think that it's a wild card, right? The way everything is happening right now, and it's very unusual.
So, yeah, you asked me about other asset classes also. So, there are hot asset classes at certain times. I know a couple of years ago, warehousing was very hot, especially with Amazon opening up, thousands of warehouses all over, e-commerce, etc. And at the time, I wished I had gotten into it. I just don't know anything about that asset class. And I know now, I guess they built too many warehouses, or maybe even companies like Amazon are, not that they're downsizing, but they figured out a way to use less. E-commerce companies also, I guess, figured out a way to use less. So I know there's a lot of hurt in the warehouse space now. I know same thing with self-storage. Self-storage is a big asset class. You see public storage, extra space storage, tons of storage places. They're easier to manage. There's no tenants really, there's no tenants that live there. The eviction process is easy. They don't pay for 2-3 months. You auction off their stuff and et cetera. But again, I just don't know really much about that asset class. I dabbled and I own some retail and some office space. I don't love it, but I know with residential, with tenants, people need to live always at all times, no matter what's going on. I typically don't invest in like luxury or class A real estate. I typically invest in B or C. And the reason being is because there's always going to be people living in B. There's always going to be people living in C. I think A might fluctuate, a bad economy, maybe some A's have to move out. But I know with B and C, in a bad economy, you have A people moving down to B. And in a good economy, you have C people moving into B. So B is like my sweet spot. It's not necessarily doctors and lawyers, but it's, people with good jobs, etc. And that's my sweet spot. Residential is typically always going to be the safest asset class. When you go to a lender, to a mortgage broker, the best loan terms is always going to be for residential because, again, you always need it. Even in 2008, when you had the big financial crisis, the people who were landlords, not necessarily flippers and renovators and sellers, but the people who were landlords who just collect rent, they didn't really get hurt in 2008 because people didn't move out necessarily of their apartments. They continued paying rent. It was hard to borrow. It was hard to sell. The rates went up, etc. But, if you were just collecting rent, you were good to go. Your house might have been valued a lot less. If you had a $200,000 house and next thing you know, it was worth $100,000 and your mortgage was $150,000, you were underwater. But as long as your tenant was still there, you're able to hold on. And by 2011, 2012, you were considered a genius.
Yeah, that was a really hard time.
Yeah, sure.
We had just gotten married at that time, and we, came into married life with, getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
By the economy. How are you seeing the value add in terms of your properties? Are you going in and renovating and upgrading? And if so, how? And also, how are you seeing the ROI in terms of that?
So, value add was and is a very big buzzword the last 5 years or so, especially when the economy was, on its way up. No matter how bad of an operator you were, the market, was so good that you looked like a genius. And, it was like almost like a simple strategy. You buy a property, add in, $6,000-$7,000 worth of renovations to each apartment, raise the rents by $150, and the bank now values the property from, $6 million to $8 million, refinance, give your investors money, give back their money, give them a windfall, and things were, perfect. Now that always works on when the economy is humming and just jumping up. When the economy slows down, that doesn't always work. Just to give an example, the last couple of years, we saw the price of materials go up tremendously. We also saw the price of insurance go up tremendously. Now, I think we sort of plateaued. So the price didn't come down, but I don't think it's jumping. We saw the price of, let's say, wood. Everyone was talking about wood or plywood, where like it doubled. Now, the year after, it didn't double again a second time. It just, went up the incremental. Same thing with insurance. Everybody knows that because it even affected the homeowners. It basically doubled, but now let's say it went up every year $200-$300. And then in 1 year, or within an 18-month period, it went up, for a single family home, it went up, let's say $2,000 or $1,800. And now it's back to going up, $200-$300 every year. So I think a lot of those big increases, the big jumps are gone. So anybody who was in the value add in the last couple of years definitely sees a lot of hurt. The biggest thing I see is people who bought in 21 and 22, I think are the ones experiencing probably the most pain. So if you bought in 2019, yes, you feel the insurance going up and, your basis is still from 2019. Your purchase price is still from 2019. So I think the biggest trouble, the biggest hurt out there are the people who bought in 21, 22, typically because they also had a plan to either refinance or sell within, let's say, a 2 or 3 year period. And because of the rates and the market, things have to get extended. I have a property I bought in early 22 with it. It was supposed to be a 2-year hold. And because of the rates, I have to hold on to it another year or 2 or 3 or 5. It happens. It's real estate. It's a long-term game. If you can hold on to real estate, typically you'll always do okay. You might have a 5-year period where it's rough, but if you could hold on and weather it, you should be okay.
Same like what you were saying about the people with the properties in 2008. They ended up, even if they were under, if they could hold on to it eventually, you're saying that they were okay. Is that true in that case as well?
Yeah. 2008, the people who took the biggest hit were people who had to sell. Who has to sell? Home builder has to sell. A flipper, a guy who's buying, renovating, and flipping a house has to sell. People who have to sell are the ones who could get hurt because if the market shifts, all of a sudden they can't sell, which means their holding costs are a lot more. A guy who's buying a house to flip, typically not getting like a regular 30-year mortgage. He's typically getting some sort of short-term loan, hard money loan. So every month that he has to hold it costs him more money, takes more money out of his profit. Home builder, same thing. They're not in the landlord business, so they need to sell. So whether they have to discount it, whether they lose it from, because they can't pay the mortgage or whatever it is. But somebody who's really just a landlord and is able to keep chugging along, he should be fine and, weather any storm. Almost like a stock. You buy a stock. You buy, let's say, Microsoft stock or Google stock, just because it went down today doesn't mean you lost it. You're able to hold it. And if you have the guts to hold it over the long term, it should be fine. Obviously stocks and Microsoft and ask your investment advisor, I'm not advocating for anything, but as long as you can hold on to it when it comes to real estate, you should be okay. And even if the value itself is not going up on its own, just by mere inflation, the value goes up. What's 100,000 yesterday, just by inflation, is 150,000 today. And your purchase price is still the same. It's almost as if, back when I was a kid, you could buy a slice of pizza, let's say for $1. And today it's, $3.50, $4, whatever it is. It's almost as if I bought tons of pizza back then, stuck it in my freezer and try to sell it today. I'd be making a mint, but, with stale pizza.
Exactly. I was going to say nobody's going to want to eat it.
Right.
Unless it's Amnon's. Amnon's pizza, everybody would eat.
Of course.
Amazing. And in terms of design, are you seeing with the value add that is always something that helps to get better tenants and keep them longer?
So value add is really something that's always been around. The term value add, I'm only hearing like the last 5 or 8 years. In general, it's always about raising your rent, keeping your purchase price the same. You buy it one time. When a tenant moves out, you try to put in a nicer kitchen or fix the bathroom so you could get a better tenant. So the value add is really always there, but it really became a buzzword the last, 8 years or so. So, you have people that are buying with the value add. I don't know if they're saying value add anymore, because I know it got a bad rap, because there's a lot of people who are buying property where it doesn't make sense today. It only makes sense after the value add. So if they got stuck in middle because of the high cost of, let's say, renovations and they can't finish, they sort of got stuck. Listen, if you could buy a deal that, and I've said this so many times, if you could buy a deal that pencils in today, you should be okay. If you're buying a deal where you're banking on a higher rent with, the value add or whatever it is, then you might be in trouble. Now, you could buy a deal where, and I've done this before, you buy a deal from somebody who's owned a property for 20 years, the property might be okay, but since he's in it for so much less because he bought it 20 years ago, all his tenants might be paying an average of $600 when everyone else is paying $900. And the reason why he's okay with it is because he paid $2 million for the property, 20 years ago, and today it's worth $8 million. There's a value add over there, but it's not necessarily fixing up every apartment. Sometimes it's just buying, the right deal with under, tenants that are, way below market. But if you're banking on, renovation in order to bring it up, just make sure you know what you're doing.
Make sure it pencils. I love that. The last thing before we go, and this has been such an amazing episode. I really enjoyed every minute learning from you. I would love to hear, you had mentioned before about tenants and how you keep them longer, and how important it is to communicate with them and make sure that they're happy. I know that there are a lot of landlords out there that will try to push tenants out in order to raise the rents. And I think that your view is opposite that. Can you explain?
Sure. So, I've made this mistake so many times over the years where, rent renewal is, coming up, and I say to myself, hey, I can get $25 extra a month. That's, $300 a year. Times, whatever, it's great. And what I learned over the years is that sometimes that $25 increase sometimes pisses off the tenant so much where they're going to move out. And I used to say to myself, no problem, they'll move out. I'll get a new tenant that's paying the $25 extra, or maybe even I'll try to get $50 extra, and, great. And over the years, I realized that the most expensive part of being a landlord is a vacancy. And I'm not talking a vacancy where I can't fill it up. I'm talking a vacancy where you have somebody living there for a year or two and they decide to move out. No matter what, if you get lucky, you could replace that day, but it's never like that, because you got to do showings and the tenant's already living there still, the old tenant's living there still. So no matter what, you're going to have at least 30 days, a month of vacant. So right off the bat, you're losing the rent. It's 11 months instead of 12 months for the year. On top of that, when somebody moves out and somebody new is moving in, they typically want it to be, freshly painted. You got to then, fix or repair any little thing that maybe the previous tenant either did themselves or was okay with. And sometimes it's 2 months. So just on a dollar amount, you're looking at $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $7,000 with every vacancy, from as little as possible to as high as possible, based on the missed rent, based on the fixing or renovating or repairing. And not just that, your headspace is filled with this vacancy. So whether it's you or your team, they're doing showings, they're doing new applications, they're going through the process. People are being kept busy. And what I started doing a little while ago is I would reach out to every tenant before their lease expires 4 months before. Now, 4 months is a long time. And I reach out to them 4 months before and ask them, hey, what's your plan? And a lot of times they'd be like, whoa, it's 4 months before. And I'd say, yeah, we just want to know what your plan is. And when I ask that question, it sort of opens up this Pandora's box of responses. Either they'll say, I'm staying, and I say, okay, great. Or they'll say, I'm leaving because your maintenance guy is horrible. Or I'm leaving because you never fixed this leak. Or I'm leaving because I just can't afford it. They give me all the reasons. And what I try to do is, if they say they're staying, I say, okay, great. I'm going to send you over a lease renewal now. It's 4 months before. If you get it back to me within the next 7 days, I'm going to deduct $50 from your first month's rent after the lease is renewed. So it's sort of 4 months before. Now I have this lease renewed and I'm good to go. If they tell me they're leaving for whatever the reason is, I ask them, if I were to make sure all your complaints, all your, the leak or whatever that you said wasn't addressed, if I make sure to get this done, does that change anything? And sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. If they say no, I'll try to ask them further. What can we do? I'll go all the way to the point of, would you renew right now? It's 4 months before. I'll send you the lease renewal. If we were to deduct $25 a month from your rent. And that speaks volumes. Wow, I'm paying $800 a month right now. If I renew now, I could pay, $775. And for me, it's worth it because it's $300 for the year. at $25, as opposed to a month of vacancy, like I said, possibly repairing, fixing other items, and really just the headspace. It's on my mind. I got to get somebody to show it, advertise it, multiple showings, taking a chance on somebody new if they're going to continue paying. So I'm really trying to mitigate this vacancy as early as possible. I'm trying to address it as early as possible. And so I'm starting 4 months before. Even if they tell me that they're moving no matter what, at least now I have sort of the 4 months notice where I can sort of get my team in place to literally show up, the day they move out, to start the painting, etc. It just gives me more time. If somebody tells me, hey, they're buying a house, it's a good answer as to why they're leaving. Mazel tov, congratulations. As a landlord, I want them to stay forever, but there's nothing I can really tell them to stick around. The only people I want moving out are somebody buying a house, somebody, moving out of state and they have no choice, or, if they die, I guess. But I don't want anybody else moving out. And I'm trying to mitigate that as much as possible.
Also, if they're not cooperating with other tenants.
Correct. No, those people, correct. Those people I want out no matter what. And, I let them know, not 4 months, because then they'll be upset. I let them know 45 days saying, the lease is not being renewed, etc.
You have such a wealth of knowledge and a perspective that is very unique. And I haven't come across anyone so far that does it that way. I mean, maybe there are, but 4 months before, doing everything you can to keep them in the unit. It's really incredible.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm doing this a while, and a lot of trial and error on my part. And like I said, when I started, I was doing everything myself. So I really learned almost every aspect of the business. It's like when you have this, the CEO of Ford, who he spends a few days, assembling the car, and then he spends a few days at the dealership. They get a sense of every part of the business. So when they're in their office in the ivory tower, they could make better decisions.
Amazing. Can you leave our audience with 3 tips in terms of building a fund or investing in property, whatever those 3 tips are? What would be your 3 top choices?
Okay. So if you are looking to invest in real estate, make sure you invest with somebody you like and you trust. The deal itself doesn't really matter because it's all about the operator. You could have a great operator that takes a bad deal and makes it work. And you could have a great deal with a bad operator and it doesn't work. The better the operator, the better off you are. If you wanted to invest in real estate yourself without anybody, my suggestion is to go out and look and jump right in and buy a 2-family home near your house somewhere and really learn the ins and outs. Make sure you have enough capital to reserve, in reserve. That's the biggest. Let's see what else. I love real estate. Real estate's a great asset class. If you could do well in it, you'll really do well. But it's not for everybody. Some people want to just sleep at night and not think anything. And I've had investors or potential investors where I told them, I don't think real estate's for you. As much as I want your money, you're going to be too nervous. You're going to be losing sleep at night, or it's the only 50,000 you have. Put it in something safe. Put it in SPY, the stock market. Buy a fund, tracks the 500 top companies, and the CEOs of those 500 top companies are smarter than me and smarter than you. You buy SPY, you're buying a basket of those 500 stocks. Even if one goes bust, the other 499 will do well. And if that's the only 50 grand you have, put it in there. You'll sleep at night. You won't be nervous. And even if it goes down, historically, the stock market always goes up. And you're good to go. You might not get any cash flow. You might not get any tax benefits, but it's a good place to start. So invest in real estate if you have the money. Don't invest your last few dollars into a deal. I don't like taking investors who that's all the money they have. I like when they're in other real estate deals and now investing in mine. I think that's the advice I have for everybody.
That's amazing. If anyone wants to reach out to you, learn more, how can they do that?
Sure. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Stephen Weinstock. There are some other Stephen Weinstocks out there, so make sure the picture is this. My company is here, We Capital, the logo here, WECAPITAL, the letter X.com, WeCapitalX.com. You could email me, Steven, STEVEN, at WeCapitalX.com. I have an Instagram account because my kids made me have one. I'm not sure what it is, but they can reach me out like that. Yeah. Thank you, Liat. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. It's really, really been a pleasure learning from you. And I can't wait to share all of this with our audience.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.